Hi everyone, my name is Amanda Ridding. I consider myself to be an amateur student at law. I don't give out legal advice, but I do like to share my research with people along with the evidence where I make my determinations, where my determinations come from, in the hopes of helping other Canadians better understand the law. Again, I don't give legal advice. I do recommend that you validate the information that I give, and if necessary, ask a legal professional to validate the information that I provide. I always speak from an province of Ontario perspective because that is where I am located. But quite often when I cite provincial information, you can usually find the equivalent in your own province by going to the corresponding statutes to read the rules for your province. Today I want to talk about jurisdiction. In Canada, we don't use the word jurisdiction very much. The word we have a tendency to use is authority. But the reality is that establishing the authority is to establish jurisdiction. And I think it's really important that people understand that we need to understand what jurisdiction is, because when you ask most Canadians, if I were to ask you what does jurisdiction mean to you, the majority of people who I ask that question think municipal, provincial, and federal, but it's much more than that. Jurisdiction will establish the geographical territory for which the authority extends over, but it also defines the legal authority. That is a key point. It defines the legal authority. And then it also defines who has the authority to hear or make a ruling or intervene. So I'm going to start with that. Who has the authority to hear? Who has the authority to intervene? If you are pulled over by a police officer, the police officer would be pulling you over under the Highway Traffic Act. The Highway Traffic Act and the Police Services Act are two statutes or acts of legislation that have been created to give under the Legislative Assembly of Ontario, to give the police officer the authority to intervene. I'm going to say intervene, not enforce. They have the authority to intervene. The reason why I won't use the word enforce is because only a court can enforce with an order. So these acts of legislation, and I have some other videos that'll teach you how to identify the act that you may be charged under or may be pursuing a tort damage using. You need to identify the act, and then you need to look up the rule that applies to the act. And I say rule because in court they call it rule. They don't call it a section. And so when you look at the Highway Traffic Act and you're charged under Section 128, what they're really saying is you broke Rule 128, and that's where they get the term rule of law from. So when I start talking about rules in the future, I'm referring to a section number under an act, but that section number actually is a rule. So with that in mind, the Highway Traffic Act will state in the rules who has the authority to intervene and what court has the authority to hear and judge and rule on the order on the ticket. Of course, where the alleged offense occurs will set the geographical territory, which will determine which court will hear. And then, of course, people need to understand where the legal authority comes from. Because jurisdiction, because it's made up of essentially, from what I can tell, 3 components, most of the time we're only ever applying 2 components. Nobody understands the 3rd component. And so I want to start drawing people's attention to where does the legal authority come from, because where the legal authority comes from is the legal jurisdiction you're in, not the geographical and not the individual. It is the legal. And the reason why is because the one act that nobody is paying attention to is the Constitution Act of 1867. Under the provisions of the Constitution Act of 1867 is where we need to focus Where does the legal authority come from? I will be doing more videos on this as quickly as I can. Roll out the information in a manner which I think will help most people understand. Thanks very much.